This is one that you may not have had circled on the calendar during the off season, but you may want to get the pen out and get it ready and get it quickly out because it's on Friday night and it opens up a great weekend of college football across the country, but specifically in the Big Ten. Maryland's 4-0. Iowa's 4-0. They meet in College Park on Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. We're talking Maryland. We're talking Iowa in the big matchup here on the Voice of College Football. We got Corey Brada, familiar face here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. You see Corey on the top box there. Also, Steve Suter, who was an All-American kick returner, slot receiver as well at Maryland 2002. Look him up. You're going to find a litany of ACC and NCAA kick return, punt return records right there from Steve. He's currently in his first year as a Maryland Network radio analyst. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be joined by a Maryland legend and breaking down what should be a great game between two undefeated teams. I think both teams are for real, so this should be a great Friday night spotlight for both.
Absolutely. Folks on the line, you know the deal. Leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics, and we will get those to Corey and to Steve. Hey, Steve, we'll start with you. And before we start with the here and now in this huge game, let's talk about your playing days back about 20 years ago, just in regards to those were the Ralph Friedgen days. Those probably the last time that most people would associate Maryland football with being nationally relevant in the rankings, competing in major bowl games. What was Maryland football like? Why did you make the choice to go to Maryland? Just give us a kind of a snapshot of your career and Maryland football at the time.
Well, I chose Maryland really just from the in-state perspective, and I was a big family guy. My parents came to, I had the parents that came to every football game. My dad was the coach in high school, or my rec council growing up. So I wanted to make sure I went to a place where they could come see most of the games, home ones at that, and if they could make some away ones up and down the East Coast, that'd be great too. They ended up coming to pretty much every game, so it worked out from that standpoint. The other reason, I wasn't really heavily recruited, so that really limited my options. I went to a small school in Maryland, North Carroll. It's in Carroll County. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and we weren't very good. I didn't win a lot of games my senior year. I won 2. My junior year, I won 5, but I was doing well individually. And so my junior year, I ended up committing to Maryland after I went down there for a junior combine, which they held. All the juniors in the state can come and almost do like a combine kind of workout for a 40 vertical leap and bench press. And I was the fastest kid there. So then it piqued their interest. Looking at you, obviously with your history, I was joking with myself saying I'm a poor man's version of Tim Dwight for you Iowa guys out there. Just made my name when I got to Maryland as a returner early. Saw that was how I could get on the field quickly, and it worked out winning the return job. And that really is what I'm known for at punt returns, especially. I was just a short, fast guy that made plays in return game. And I guess of all those records that you noted, the one I hold the most pride for that's not in the books is I never fair caught a punt in my entire career. So that's one of those like unwritten records that I took a lot of pride in. It just started happening, and then as it went and grew, I was like, well, now I can't fair catch a punt. I'm gonna look like a chump. So let's just keep going. And I certainly took my lumps for doing that. But I don't know. I feel good about having not fair caught any punts.
Steve, I have a question for you. I don't want to interrupt you, Mark, but so our post-game show here at Iowa, the Voice of College Football, we have Coach Don Patterson. I don't know if you remember Don. He was an offensive coordinator with Hayden Fry at Iowa for many years.
Okay.
And so he breaks down Iowa games. He'll join us Friday night after this game against Maryland. But I texted him Wednesday when I got confirmation that you would be joining us. And now he keep in mind, he left Iowa when Hayden retired. He went on to be the head coach at Western Illinois. Then he was an assistant at UConn. So he was sort of, and of course, Maryland wasn't in the Big Ten at that point anyways, but I had to ask him, do you remember Steve Suter? And he said, the name sounds familiar. So I refreshed him as to who you were. And of course, you're like you just talked about, your legacy of returning kicks and not taking fair catches. And he responded to me, and this is what Coach said. He said, if he was as fearless as Tim, Of course, he's talking about Tim Dwight.
Right.
That explains why you remember him. So, and so I sent him. I know Maryland Athletics did a video on your refusal to take fair catches,
right.
And so I sent that over to him, and he had to call me. It was a great conversation. So no, I was going to ask. My first question I was going to ask you. Yeah. Tim was, of course, what, 6-7 years before you. Did you watch him growing up? Was he really kind of a mentor to you, or not mentor, but idol to you?
Absolutely. I just loved how he just played kind of reckless, and he was fast. I prided myself on being fast too, and he could take hits, he could give hits, and just made such an impact watching those games, and he got so popular. And of course, obviously I can identify with how he looked. So I'm thinking, okay, if he can do it, maybe I can do it, because we're not big guys. I mean, we're just fast, stocky, and tough. So I figured, what else can I bring to the table that maybe the next guy that's more physically gifted than me can't? And it was toughness and heart. I thought, those things are, some of those things you can't learn, but some of them you can. I just, gained confidence in my toughness, and then it just became a thing. And I think it helped our punt return team as a whole, because they knew early on, I told them, guys, I'm never going to fair catch a ball. So when we go out there to return a punt, give me all you got, because I'm going to give you all I got. Because I feel bad watching some of the returns, right? You guys are busting their butt, blocking, and then the guy just fair catches it. And then I can only imagine the guy thinking, I just wasted a 50-yard sprint, blocked my butt off, and then Suter fair caught it. It's a waste of my time. So I wanted to let them know, you're not wasting your energy out there with me. You block hard, I'm bringing it back every time, and maybe it'll work, maybe it doesn't, but at least we're all on the same page. There's no guessing game. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I see a comment from Cheryl that I was either not born or I was in diapers when Steve played. I wasn't in diapers. I'm not that young, but I will say I had to Google you, Steve, because I reached out to the Maryland Athletic Department. They recommended you, and I'm glad they did. I have a question though, because I had this conversation with Coach Patterson yesterday about what teams ended up doing with Timmy Dwight, and that was just, of course, kick away from Tim Dwight. So Iowa, Hayden basically sent back 2 returners at times, and you talked about Tim Dwight's physicality. He just turned into a tremendous blocker when you kicked away from him. So did Maryland, did you guys do the same thing, or how did you handle? Because Iowa, of course, has a very dangerous punt returner this year in Charlie Jones, and we may start seeing that as Hawkeye fans, teams like Maryland or Penn State kicking away from Charlie.
Yeah, we really didn't scheme too much about them kicking away from me. It really only happened on punts, and kicking away from me on punts is just going out of bounds. Really, you could see my return numbers just kept going down as I got older, because I got less and less opportunities. There weren't chances to do that. So kickoff returns, nobody really did any of those pooches or kicked away that I can remember. So it wasn't something that we really had to plan on. But I'm sure it happened. I'm just not recollecting it, because it got pretty obvious there after that All-American year that I was not going to see the ball as many times as I wanted to. And I can remember a couple of times when they'd kick the ball out of bounds on their sideline, when I run over there to try to assess whether or not I could catch it or not, I'd be chirping and calling them babies for not kicking to me, yelling at coaches and stuff, just, having a good time with it. But, it worked out. I was going to say that, the NC State game coming in, we had one chance. My fair catch record almost got broken. Was NC State. They're backed up. They got Phillip Rivers, and it's like 6 seconds left in the half. They're going to punt it to us. My coach says, you got to go out and fair catch it, because if time runs out, we're going to get an untimed free kick down. And I'm like, oh, I'm so upset, right? I'm a senior. I haven't fair caught a punt in my career, and now I'm going to have to go out and fair catch. I'm going to do it because I'm a team player, but I'm upset inside. Luckily, he shanks it out of bounds at the 40-yard line. I didn't have to fair catch it, and the streak was intact. So that was a big moment for me. And you mentioned the age thing. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I'm probably 1 or 2 years removed from a freshman coming to Maryland. I meet them and they say, "Oh yeah, you were my dad's favorite player." Like I think I'm 1 or 2 years away from that. So the age is kicking in.
Yeah, it'll come quicker than you think. So yeah, at least you're prepared for it. Yeah, and when you make a comment about, and it's true, having not fair caught a punt. We're not talking about a guy that returned 10 or 15 punts. He set the single season punt return record of total punts returned, 56 punt returns in one season. So, you did it over and over and over. And you mentioned one thing in there about a guessing game. I guess that's one huge advantage is everybody knows, hey, Steve's always going to bring it back. We got to be ready to go. You didn't have to be like a lot of punt returners trying to look at the coverage, look at the guys running at you thinking, oh, do I have any room? Am I going to do it? Nope. You know that you're just going to catch it and go.
So, and from that standpoint, I wasn't a guy that checked like this, right? I wasn't tracking the ball and looking down. I was looking at the ball the whole time because I'm thinking surprisingly, the coaching staff never said I had a fair catch, even though I was catching them in dangerous traffic. And you would think maybe from a coach standpoint, they'd be like, Suter, you got to start fair catching these because we don't want you to muff one or get hit and fumble. It never happened, and I think it's because I never dropped any. So I just made sure I was like, catch the ball. Just as long as you catch the ball, they can't tell you got to fair catch it. So that was my main focus. And then, you just catch it, and then it just kind of instincts take over. I mean, we would call return right or we would call return left. Sometimes we really, really didn't call that many directional returns. It was just catch and see what's in front of me and where I can go, and then we would just try it out.
We are here to talk Maryland and Iowa football. The Hawks and the Terps get together on Friday night. Huge game, 8 o'clock Eastern time in College Park. We got Steve Suter on the line. You can catch him on the Maryland Radio Network calling the game as color analyst. Of course, you recognize this guy, Corey Bratta, from the Hawkeye of the Storm, posting content for us on our Iowa channel on a regular basis. And also, again, check him out on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Before we get to the nuts and bolts of the matchup on Friday night, Steve, love to get your perspective on this, and certainly Corey, chime in if you want to get some added perspective on this regarding Maryland's stance here. Now going on 7 to 8 seasons in the Big Ten. Major move, obviously, with the Big Ten expanding at the time, going to the East Coast, going after Rutgers, Maryland, a lot made out of wanting to bring in that population base from Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and New York City with those two ads. Just your perspective on life in the Big Ten for Maryland football versus what it was in the ACC, and how that change hit you at the time, and what do you think about it 7 to 8 years later?
So from a personal standpoint, I got asked this a lot, right? Because I played in the ACC, then we made the switch to the Big Ten, and they're asked my thoughts on it. And I really didn't have any thoughts negative to the move. And it's because I didn't have this strong connection to the ACC because I really didn't have any built-in rivals that I just hated and wanted to continue that rivalry. The team I wanted to beat the most always every year was West Virginia, and they weren't in the ACC. So it didn't matter to me that I was leaving, or the school was leaving to not play schools like Virginia. And I played football, so Duke at the time was not very good. So they weren't a big rival. Neither was North Carolina. So going over to the Big Ten, I saw the money like everybody else did, like the school did, on why they made the move. And I'm thinking that that's going to help the program down the line, that maybe more money is going to come into the university that can go towards the athletic department in some way. And so I saw it as a positive move. And I think the competition has elevated in the Big Ten in football. I think when we made the move, it was probably even. ACC was still very good. Florida State was still a dominator. They're not so much anymore, but they were when we were there, and right around the time we were making the switch. So I think that football competition's elevated, which is good. As far as the DMV region, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area that you're referring to, it's a great talent pool, and a lot of coaches across the country come here to recruit and steal our players, right? Steal local guys. What's changed for Maryland, or what's been hard for Maryland, is to keep those in-state guys in state. And they've just had a little coaching corral of coaches the last 10 years. They just couldn't stabilize it. And there were multiple reasons for why. One was a bad hire. The other had a unfortunate incident with the death of a player. And then there was some flux in and out of that. And I think they finally got the right guy in Coach Mike Loxley. So he's a great recruiter. I'm sure you guys know his pedigree of wherever he's gone, he's pulled in big time recruits. And he recruited me when I was coming out of high school. So I know his style. It sounds cliche, but he's real. It's just genuine conversations that he's having with you, and he can trust them, because then when you come, the best part about him is when you talk to players that are already there, right? So Loxley gave me a recruiting pitch, or he gave somebody else a recruiting pitch, and then when I come to Maryland, it's the same as the pitch. That doesn't always happen, right? You get sold a bill of goods, then you go to the school and you're like, who is this guy? And this isn't what they told me. And now I'm playing a different position, or, whatever the case may be. So that doesn't usually happen where he goes. So then you'll have a sophomore or a junior that can attest to Loxley when they're talking to a freshman, or they're talking to a possible recruit. Hey, this is what Loxley's telling me, or this is what he told me. And when I got here, that's what happened. So I think that means a lot to the kids being recruited, because I would hate to be told nobody lied to me and said I was a running back in high school. And nobody lied to me and said I was going to come play running back, even though I wanted to. Loxley said, hey, we don't know what we're going to do with you. You're going to come in as an athlete, and we're going to try you out. And they tried me out at DB. They tried me at receiver, and receiver hit. And then I started making plays there. So, it was just a truthful recruiting process. And you may not see it right now, but I think this year for Coach Loxley is probably the year you can finally see him, maybe weeding out is the wrong word, but weeding out some of the players that aren't guys that are doing it the right way, the way he would want it done. He's probably stealing that a little bit from Nick Saban, because he was down there at Alabama, right? The Alabama way, which is nothing wrong with that. That's a proven model. And you're going to see 9 or 10 D linemen play tomorrow. And 4 will be true freshmen. So that shows to the depth of the recruiting, and they're not going to come in and, jump time. They're going to start a series in the third quarter. You're going to have 3 true freshmen on the line. So that goes down the list at linebacker, and then on the other side of the ball, running back and receiver. So he's got the depth coming in, the young talent, and I think this is a real pivotal year, or turning point year, for Maryland to not be at the bottom of the conference moving forward.
Steve, I do want to, and of course we'll talk Iowa. We'll talk this matchup and how these two teams match up. I think it's a matchup of strengths, clearly. What I was fascinated by, and again, this is something Don Patterson brought up to me over the phone, was the number of skill position players that Maryland produces. And talk about opposites. I mean, as far as what these two programs produce, as far as NFL talent, it really is polar opposites. I mean, it's amazing the number of skill position guys. And we're not just talking about, obviously, the Mike Loxley era, but, Randy Edsel and going back. DJ Moore, you think of Stephon. I mean, those Stephon Diggs and DJ Moore are probably 2 of the top 15 wide receivers in the league. Right. You could make that argument. Certainly, I mean, definitely Stephon Diggs is probably top 10 or maybe even top 5. And then Ty Johnson and Trey Edmonds. I'm trying to think of the kid that got who was the most recent running back that
Jake Funk is on the Rams.
Funk, yeah.
Yep.
It's just amazing. And of course, Iowa doesn't have any running backs. Mekhi Sargent's on a roster finally this year, but Iowa, of course, produces the linemen and the tight ends, and the, right. So I think that's fascinating. And as far as the matchup is concerned, Steve, I mean, obviously Mike said it this week, and his Coach Loxley said it during his weekly press conference that Maryland prides itself on making big plays and stopping big plays. Of course, Iowa, their defense, Phil Parker's, him and Norm Parker, their defenses have been predicated on stopping the big play. People like to call it the bend don't break, and they've made a living on that for ever since Kirk Ferentz has been here, and really back into the Hayden Fry years. So, what gives on Friday? I mean, what as far as a key, and of course we can talk more about the ins and outs of this matchup, but what are the keys to figuring out which strength actually comes out on top?
Yeah, that's great. You're analyzing it real well, just like I kind of will. I've watched all 4 of your games and start the season, and I've made my own recruiting, scouting aspects of it. But I just know Coach Loxley and Brian Stewart, the offensive or defensive coordinator on defense, they're just going to do everything they can to not let you guys run the ball. They're going to try to shut down Iowa's run game and see if you guys can beat them on the perimeter, because I think they think as well that the Maryland secondary is one of the top in the conference. They got skill guys that are good. Now, they unfortunately lost Deonte Banks, their number 1 corner. He's probably out for the year. They lost him second game of the season to Howard. So they had to make a little bit of adjustments. But you're going to, like our free safety, Nick Cross, he's going to play in the NFL, and you're going to see him flying around. He's fast. and he's got size. He's just a great player, and he's smart. So he's a guy that'll play on Sundays. Jacorian Bennett probably will too, and Tarheeb still probably will play on Sundays too. So that speaks to the perimeter talent that Maryland's always been able to produce that you were hitting at. And, it's funny. I'll backtrack for a second, and then we'll go back to the game. I just like to joke off of that. They brought me in during camp to talk to the kids and at the team and really try to emphasize networking and outside of football and take advantage of your opportunities with who you're meeting and shaking hands and take internships and volunteer and know what you want to do and don't want you to do and LinkedIn and get your profiles to do that whole thing. Right. So I would try to, and I was going to say it's a statistic of, 99% of you aren't going to go to the league, and look at me, my rosters. I thought I was going. And then when I look back, I was like, wait a minute. I played with a lot of guys that made it to the NFL from Maryland. We put a lot of talent in there. So that percentage really did work. So I left it out because it was like 80%. I got 20% of the guys went into the league. So you're going to see talent. The wide receiver group, they're really good for Maryland. Dante Demas is a stud. I'm sure you're seeing notes and stats on him. His biggest problem, he's had 3 drops that are all on third down, which are Coach Loxley would consider those turnovers. He's got to clean that up. They weren't tough catches either, just lack of concentration. And if he wants to be the number one receiver in the conference and hold those accolades, then he's got to be able to make the easy plays and keep drives because it's moved him off the field. Rakim Jarrett's had the same issue. A couple drops on the season that have stopped drives, but when he gets the ball, he can make plays. He can go 70 yards, like that. And then they got Jayshon Jones and Daryl Jones. So they go 4 deep. They got a couple more guys, but those 4 are going to play, and they'll play a lot. And Tagovailoa, I think he's the real deal. I mean, I won't say think anymore. Through 4 games, he's the real deal. If we use a golf analogy, he's 4 under through 4. He's a perfect start to the season. He's made 2 mistakes that I've even seen. One was in West Virginia. He threw into a sinking cover 2 corner on a corner route that the DB wasn't paying attention. He probably could have made a play on it, but he didn't. That was the only mental mistake I've really seen all season. And then he missed a Conquo, the tight end, this week against Kent State that on a pass he probably would complete 9 out of 10 times underhanded. So that's the only physical mistake he's made. He's legit. So your secondary is very good, and your defense, like you said, is always been a bend but don't break. So I think it's going to come down Ken Tagovailoa. I think you guys are going to give us a lot of zone coverage. Ken Tagovailoa dictate and read the zone and be patient and not take the shot where he thinks he can thread the needle on a sinking cover 2 corner or a safety trying to make a play on a post and not turn the ball over. You guys have been, and I keep saying you guys, I have been fortunate from what I've seen of a lot of takeaways, right? I think you have 9 now through 4 games. That's very opportunistic on defense, and a couple of them have been real big inside your own territory. So it's led to points quickly for the offense. So Maryland can't shoot themselves in the foot with that. You guys are, the favorite, and when you play against a favorite and you want to upset them, you can't shoot yourself in the foot and make penalties and turn the ball over. So if they can play a clean game, it's going to be fun.
Anthony McFarland's the other guy that I believe is on an active roster, and another skill position guy. But I did want to bring up Tagovailoa, and I'm glad you kind of segued into him. One of the big keys for Iowa this week, in my opinion, is containing Tagovailoa. There's no question about that. And I think his ability to run, I'm curious to get your take on that. He seemed a bit hesitant from what I've seen to take off this year. I mean, he obviously has the athleticism and the quickness to be able to scramble. And Iowa, of course, has a lot of defensive linemen. They're rotating at least 7-8 guys right now, and quality guys. So I think they'll be able to keep up with him as far as physically. Is he hesitant to run? I'm assuming he's healthy, but why does he seem a little bit hesitant to run so far?
I think it's a coaching thing, and it's one of those. That's a really tough thing to coach or even to learn, right? How do I know when I need to turn my instincts off that say I should get out of the pocket versus I should stay in here 1 second because my guy's about to come open? I don't even know if it is coachable, other than a coach is saying, hey, you should have hung in there longer. Hey, you should have hung in there longer. Hey, you should have hung in there longer. And then maybe it kind of comes in. And so maybe that's what they've seen on film, and that's what they've been telling him. I've been wanting a couple more called runs where he doesn't even, I don't want him to have to think about it, because I think we should utilize his athletic ability. Like you say, he can run. He can rip off a 20, 25-yard run at all times. So I think if we could, or the coaching staff could, take away that decision making, let's have some called runs. Yeah, it looks like zone read. Yeah, it looks like an RPO, but we're really pulling and we're really going to run a power with the quarterback. And maybe that could get him in the mindset of, yeah, I can make more plays on my feet. But I mean, that is something that, looking back on the games, I wouldn't say I've been critical of, but it just seems like you're noticing indecision or just not sure. Do I take off? Oh, should I stay in here? Should I go? I don't know what. And I've tried to put myself in that position. That's a feel thing, right? That's something that you just kind of feel, and it's got to be instinctual. So who knows if the coaching staff's been putting the reins on him, trying to say you shouldn't have bailed out this quick, because I look at it, the kid's smart enough and he can throw a ball anywhere on the field that I could see where they would say, hey, you can't stop at your second read. You go to the 3 because 3 was open. So maybe in the past, like last season, he was just going 1 and 2 and taking off, and now they've taught him it, and at least he's accepting the coaching that will go to that 3rd read or look for the check down before he takes off. I'm speculating on that, but that's where I would go with it.
Mark, you're obviously a college football and a Big Ten savant. Who's the best quarterback in the Big Ten right now, just from what we've seen?
You know what? It's funny because I didn't give it much thought until somebody asked me that the other day, because we all have our preconceptions during the off season as to, well, this is the way the college football season is going to go. These are the best players. But my goodness, there's a group of players that I would say are struggling right now, like a Graham Mertz, and you can go across the board. Tanner Morgan's not the player that he was a couple of years ago. And then Sean Clifford is a similar player in a lot of ways, but he's cleaned him up a lot of the mistakes and is playing much better. But from the standpoint of making dynamic throws down the field, this is the guy. Tagovailoa, he can make throws, and especially it's magnified by having those weapons on the outside that other quarterbacks in the league, at least that we've seen thus far. Maybe the young Ohio State quarterbacks will get to that point. But right now, I think he's playing better than anybody else in the league.
I will say this. I'll add on from you saying the receivers on the outside, they haven't bailed him out of anything. There hasn't been, oh my gosh, Demas just caught it over 3 guys and it's a great catch. No, they get the ball when they're supposed to, and then they're open. And that's just credit to Tagovailoa. There hasn't been any receiver. I haven't seen one play a receiver make where I go, woo, that should have been picked off, or man, that was a great play. No, they're open. They're usually one-on-one because he's making the right reads, or they're just open in the zone because he's made the right read and he's putting the ball right on the money. So, I mean, I would have to agree with you. I mean, I've watched every play, right, first 4 games, and I can only pick out 2 of 125 pass attempts where I think, maybe not the right play. I mean, that's crazy. And the receivers have 11. I've counted 11 drops, and not being overly harsh, you maybe should have caught it. No, 11 passes that should have been caught, and he's still at 75% completion. So it could be 80.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Mark. And I do think, and this is not an insult to is it Taulia? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Talia. Okay, it's not an insult to Talia, but I do believe this to be a somewhat weak year at the quarterback position in the Big Ten. I mean, Adrian Martinez is playing better, but you mentioned Tanner Morgan, and certainly Iowa has had its share of, I don't want to say issues at quarterback, but certainly not an elite. They're not elite at that position. So yeah, and there are people. I mean, Big Ten Network. I watched a excerpt today, and they were talking about Tagovailoa being in the Heisman race, which was kind of shocking to me. And I'm not saying, of course, they're going to pump that up as a Big Ten. I mean, again, he's probably has the best chance of any Big Ten quarterback does. He's a young guy. Is there any way that the moment, I know he's played on Friday nights, but a game like this, or as we continue, you foresee the moment getting too big for him, or what is he kind of like from a mental standpoint in your mind?
So I haven't talked to him personally too much. From when I have had discussions with him, he's laid back. He's not going to the best in the interview, right? He's just going to be like, yes, sir, no, sir, and just keep it quiet and keep it short. And you said he's young. I mean, this is 4 games, and he only started 4. So this is only his 9th game as a starting quarterback. So he is very young from that standpoint. And they all they talked about last year was, can they clean up the mental mistakes? Because he was so flashy, he would have games where he dominated, and then you have games where you're just like, why did you throw that ball? It got picked. That's why he had 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in only 4 games. Because you could tell the physical tools were there, but could the mental ones catch up? And so early on, it looks like they have. And I mean, I understand the strength of schedule we've played so far hasn't, not blowing anybody out of the water with who we've played, but West Virginia is looking like a much better win than we knew first game of the season. And Illinois played us tough. We got away with one there, but he played great. It wasn't his fault that they kept going off the field on offense. They were having a lineman would miss a block, or a receiver would drop a ball, or a receiver would run the wrong route, and then they'd have to punt. So if he can keep up their production, and I think Maryland now has the 10th hardest schedule in the nation the rest of the way out. I mean, if you can put up the production against that type of schedule going out, then of course you got to start talking about, I mean, maybe Heisman's too lofty, but if he's going to, he could throw for like 3,000 yards and have all these TDs. I mean, then you got to start throwing him in the discussion a little bit. If Maryland wins, right? You can't go 7-5 or something. It probably doesn't put you in the Heisman race. So,
hey, Steve, I'm going to take us away from the matchup briefly because I'm curious to get your take on this. In looking at the Maryland program, and I'm not one to overemphasize intangibles and momentum and all those things, but you've been in the locker room, you've been in a program and known, I'm sure, when things were going in the right direction or when things weren't quite what they should be. And this is a program that you mentioned DJ Durkin. He made strides in recruiting. They were recruiting top 15 to 20 classes. The talent was always better than what the product was on the field. Michael Loxley comes in, and obviously he had a great experience at Alabama, but he was not a winning head coach coming in. They had a string of horrible losses in the Big Ten in 2019. They were just getting hammered week after week after week. They close out that season with a string of routes on the losing end. Then they start 2020. They go to Northwestern and they get completely obliterated. Don't even total 100 yards of total offense. Turn around the next week, play Minnesota. They're playing a team that went 11-2 the previous year. They get down by 3 scores. They're in the second half down by 3 scores in that game. And you would think if there was any team that would lack the confidence to come back in a game like that after getting beaten down every week the previous year to close the season, and what happened against Northwestern, then all of a sudden they flip a switch. They come back and make a monumental comeback to win that game. And not that they took off after that, but they were a much different team. They competed against Indiana, a really good team, and they finished fairly strong. And then now this. Can you put your finger on what's happened to this Maryland football team?
It can happen quick. It really can. The switch can happen. When Maryland was 5-6 the year before I showed up. Then we went 5-6, and then Ralph Friesen shows up, and we win 3. We go 3 straight seasons of winning 10+ games. The players weren't any different. The coaching staff was different, but the mindset changed on the team as well. We were hearing all this offensive guru this, offensive guru that in regards to Friesen. But so we were thinking, well, if we can't win with this guy, then maybe we can't win. So I think he was like backs against the wall. We're all prideful guys, and it just clicked. He put a great coaching staff around him that complemented his coaching style. And then we won 1 or 2 games to start the season, and we got confident, and then we got hot. And then when you think you're better than you are, sometimes it makes you as good as you should be, and then you're playing well and you're winning. So for this team, I think it's been a challenge for Coach Loxley to find the coaching staff around him, right? Because I've never understood this for all my years of football and being involved. The big-time coordinators, for the most part, you get a head coaching job because you were good at being a coordinator, and then you become the head coach, and then you stop calling plays. That's what got you there. For the most part, that's how it happens, right? There are exceptions, but that's usually how it happens. And that's how it happened for Coach Loxley. He was calling plays, and he would get the head coach job, and then he get somebody else to call plays. It seems like it doesn't work. He goes to Alabama. He's calling plays for Alabama. They win national championship. Then he becomes a head coach here, and then he stops calling plays. And I don't think he's been able to find a good mesh of the coaches around him. Now, Dan Enos is so far calling a great first half of the season. I think he's the extension of Coach Loxley that he's been looking for. He was with them at Alabama. I think that's where they realized that they're probably on the same wavelength to calling plays. So he plucked them away from Cincinnati last year after they had a real good season. And so why they started so bad, I think was a talent thing. Loxley then started throwing all his true freshmen in there, guys that he was recruiting, said, hey, we're gonna get you guys game experience fast because I want you guys to evolve quickly. And so he's done that, and it's starting to pay off. You got Ruben Hippolyte now at middle linebacker. He's a true sophomore. He played 3 games last year as a true freshman, and now he's starting middle linebacker as a sophomore. And so I think that's an Alabama thing too. And maybe it's a newer age thing because when I was coming up, you came in, you almost always redshirt. Every freshman did, unless you were a complete stud. Now it's like the redshirt thing doesn't even come up. If you can contribute, he's throwing you in there. And they do that at Alabama because they know they're only getting 4 years out of these guys, or 3 at that, and they're bouncing. So let's get them in early. Let's not waste a year if we can use them. And so he's doing that. That's how the depth at each position has been picking up, and the confidence has been picking up for everybody. And now I'll just put this all back on Tagovailoa too. None of this stuff happens if your quarterback's not any good. And he was good last year for some of the games. They couldn't stop the run to save the life against Northwestern. That game you referenced, they gave up 350 yards on the ground. Tagovailoa never got a chance to get started. Minnesota, he played fantastic. That's how they could come back and win. He was throwing dimes everywhere, and he was running the ball too. They built up the momentum. They should have beat Rutgers in the final game of the season, but Tagovailoa didn't play. He was out for COVID. So that was a game they lost in overtime. So they could have win on a 3-game. I mean, they blew out Penn State, right? They did Minnesota, blew out Penn State, lost to Indiana, lost to Rutgers. Should have beat Rutgers. So they should have went, 4? They should have went 3-2 instead of 2-3. And they should have, and then it wouldn't have been that much of a crazy 4-0 start, right? Because they would have finished the season of winning 3 out of 4. But you got to have a QB. And right now he's a QB. Could have fall apart maybe, and this is just fool's gold, but I don't think it is, because I'm not watching guys bail him out. I'm watching him make the right decision. And that shouldn't change unless you guys and whoever else in the Big Ten is, disguising coverage that well that it's tricking him. So it could continue.
Steve, I'll cut to the chase on at least my predictions on this game. And I guess I won't give a score yet, but preseason, I had said that I thought this was a trap game for Iowa, and I picked this as one of Iowa's 3 losses. And the other 2 were on the road at Iowa State and against Northwestern, which, of course, Northwestern has really kind of taken a step back this year, it seems like. But, again, I picked Maryland to win this game preseason. I've actually switched that pick now because I believe this game, at least from my perspective, both teams have equal respect. And maybe there's some disrespect that the Maryland players are grabbing from somewhere. I did see something, and again, this is message board talk. I saw a Maryland fan say this week that they overheard a Maryland player in a restaurant say something about how Iowa was overrated. Again, I don't know if there's anything to read into that. I doubt that. I don't know how you can say that about the number 5 team in the country. I mean, they may be overrated, but again, they're undefeated, just like Maryland is. But one of the things that I think will be key in this game, and again, this comes back to discipline. It comes back to coaching, of course. I mean, let's be honest. Maryland has still committed too many penalties this year. Yep. If you look at the numbers, my observations, and I've only been able to watch. I watched the majority of the Kent State game back after the Iowa game. I watched the Illinois game from start to finish. One thing that I do think Maryland struggles with is discipline at times, because it's not just penalties. It's also some targeting calls. I thought there had been maybe a questionable targeting call here or there, but there have been calls there was at least one call under review in that Illinois game that I thought was very close to being called targeting. I don't think they called it.
Right.
But I wonder how that, again, we're talking strength against strength. That could be in my mind, that's the difference Saturday is Iowa is, whether Iowa fans like it or not, they have a game manager at quarterback. They don't commit targeting penalties. They're disciplined. Their penalty numbers have been way down this year as opposed to early last year. So what are your thoughts on discipline heading into this game, at least a category I feel like Mike Locksley and this team have kind of struggled.
Absolutely. And we've brought it up every game and every post game that we've talked to Coach Locksley, and we're going over wins and he's talking about the penalties, and I've brought them up too. And they've all they've all been on defense. The defense has committed the bad penalties, and they've done it every week. And I don't know why they can't correct it, because it shouldn't. The one targeting call where the guy get kicked out of Illinois, Levante Gator, I mean, you shouldn't have to tell him that he can't Superman fly headbutt a quarterback. I mean, that was a play, and I know ESPN used it in a promotion or a advertisement for the targeting issue, and just a discussion on that. That was the epitome of why the rule's in place. I think there are a lot of reasons, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on this, but I talked about it during my podcast this week, that I think there are lots of reasons for officials to actually look at this rule, because I think there's a lot of fallacies with this rule. I think it's a dumb rule on many regards, but plays like that are the reason that the rule's in place. And there've been a number of those this year for Maryland. Yeah. So we've talked about that. Where I was like, I don't understand how you, as a player now, would do that. And how can a coach, that would drive me sick. I would just look at that as a coach, like, really? I have to tell you can't flying headbutt a quarterback? I mean, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to go over that. And they've a lot of them happen on third downs where they're about to get off the field. They commit a penalty. They extend a drive. They did in West Virginia, where they took a field goal off the board, and the next play was a touchdown. So that's a 4-point swing. They cannot do that against Iowa if they want to have a chance to win. So it's really, well, no, there's no excuse for it. I want to say I'm giving them a little bit of a break, because the defense has played really good this year for Maryland. But they're the ones that have been committing the bonehead penalties. It seems like every interception we've had, somebody's had a crackback block or unsportsmanlike conduct, because now they think they can just go rock a receiver and they want to do it. That's selfish play, and Coach Locksley says that stuff. And I've been at practice where he's, brought everybody together and ripped a player here and ripped one there, because they're being selfish for trying to get the attention. And it's all, hey, look at me, I just did this, I just did that. And it's not about the team. He wants everything to be about the team, like every coach should, and preaches. He says a lot, the standard is the standard, and their standard is not committing those penalties, but they haven't been able to not do it. And so, yes, am I fearful? I'll be in the box, since this became their MO, second and third, fourth game of the season. I'm on third down and I'm just nervous. Like, are they going to commit a penalty? Don't jump off sides here. Please don't rough the passer. Don't have the pass interference on 3rd and 18.
Late hits out of bounds.
Or late. Oh my gosh, the 2 on Kent State. That was bananas to end the half. Like, you shouldn't have to touch the quarter. Just don't touch them. And I shouldn't have to tell you shouldn't have to do that.
It's a terrible series.
Terrible series. Yeah. And so they got to. I mean, they were fortunate. Kent State committed a couple penalties that pulled touchdowns back from their side.
I think the one was a phantom call, to be completely honest. I believe it was a second holding penalty. Probably shouldn't have been called.
Right. That should have been a touchdown.
The first one was an easy call, but yeah, you're right. And so that was my next topic I wanted to bring up. That Kent State game, if you look at parameters, and again, I keep bringing up Don Patterson. So Don, again, not only was he an assistant under Hayden, he also does analytics for Kirk Ferentz now, and he did analytics for Bill Snyder at Kansas State. And so he delves into the ins and outs of any parameter you can think of in the Big Ten that's essential to winning. And the top 3 parameters in that Kent State-Maryland game were actually won by Kent State. And Maryland found a way to win. And, of course, it comes down to explosive plays. That's how you overcome those parameters. So, but of course, now explosive plays become a primary parameter that's essential to winning. That Kent State game, if you just go through the box score, I mean, not even talking about those specific parameters, just go through the box score. It was really close. And then you look at the score, and was it like 37-9 late in the game? I mean, Kent State needed a late score to even make it look as close as it was. So it's sort of an odd deal. I mean, you see teams who are even in the box score win by 7, 10, 14, but to win by as many points as by 3 scores. And again, you can look at the penalties called in the second quarter. Again, you mentioned the 2 that were the touchdowns were called back, and Kent State kind of did the same thing. They've got an issue there with discipline, because the week prior they fumbled at Iowa's 1-yard line when they had a chance to pull within 2 against the Hawkeyes. So, and of course, Iowa beat Kent State by about the same margin. I don't know, Mark, do you have anything to add on Coach Locksley or this matchup at all?
I was curious to know, when Steve's watching these games and watching these the physical type penalties we're talking about, targeting, personal fouls. The one that drives me crazy now watching, in addition to the targeting, which needs to be addressed and cleaned up, in my opinion, is the pass rushers who used to get that step and a half to the quarterback. Now are expected to stop on a dime at the last second after the quarterback releases. And I was just curious, how many of those plays do you see, Steve, and think, yeah, 20 years ago when I was playing, that was not a foul?
Yeah, none of these really. Everything we've talked about were fouls, and it's made it harder to play for sure. As a player, I get it. On defense, it's harder to play defense. I understand that totally. And you can't be rest in peace, like a Sean Taylor anymore. You can't be running around busting people's heads open. You just can't do it. And you got to learn how to not do it. And when you see guys do it now, you just get frustrated, and you just don't understand why they haven't figured out they can't play that way. Because for these guys, 3 or 4 years from now, they're not going to have grown up watching the old school style of football. They will not even know what it is. So you should know what targeting is since 5 years old, and you should be playing knowing targeting from 6, 7, 8 all the way. So it should be going away. I don't know why Maryland can't stop getting out of their own way. But yes, as I watch it, I'm not so much one of those guys that sit in their old school train of thought and say, my way was better. Our way of playing was better, because, I am for the safety, really. I mean, I was a receiver, so I get, not want to hit somebody straight in the head with the top of your head. Yeah, that you probably can avoid doing it. Now, I understand when a guy makes a play and then he ducks too, and then they're both ducking and they hit heads. I think there needs to be more leniency on that, where if you're going to review it, and we hit heads, but I, as the offensive player, had a little something to do with that too, that I think there should be leniency. And I don't think they have that yet. It's, did we see crown of the helmet, hit helmet? All right, you're gone.
There needs to be a slider, so to speak, a severity rules, because it's ridiculous to disqualify a guy who, I mean, it's easy to tell maybe unintentionally or inadvertently committed a targeting penalty with a guy who's, like you called it, pulling a Superman move on the quarterback. There needs to be, I mean, I'm okay with ejecting someone if he deserves to be ejected, but more times than not, it changes a game. I think back to 2017, Marco will remember this game very well, and I know I bring it up a little bit too much with him because he's an Ohio State fan, but Ohio State 2017, of course, Iowa fans remember that to be a rout, and it was a rout, but there was a crucial targeting penalty against Nick Bosa in that game, and of course, he was out, I think, at least the first half. I don't know if it was first quarter, but it was first half, Mark. And, who knows? That changes things, and Iowa put up over 50 points against the Buckeyes. So those targeting penalties, they just change the game more than they need to. Again, tack on extra yardage. Make it a 30-yard penalty if it's egregious.
Right.
But don't eject a guy, especially if you can't say definitively that it was intentional.
Yeah.
Especially when all the ejections aren't created equal. It's the only penalty in sports I can think of where it depends on at what point in the game you committed the foul. Of how much time you're going to miss and how much your team is going to miss you. If you commit that on the last play of the game, then it's different than if you commit it the first play of the third quarter. You're missing either from anywhere from a half a game to almost a full game, depending on that makes no sense. Make it a number of series or plays or something, even though I don't even think it should be an ejection of any sort in my book. But again, I will take that right to ask Steve one other question, and I've got one for you, and then you guys can take it home. It seems as though Maryland, during this time in which they've gotten a little bit beat up in the Big Ten, we mentioned the last couple wide receivers, defensive backs, running backs that have made it to the league. It hasn't been a speed issue on the perimeter on either side of the ball. It's been in the trenches holding up against Michigan, Ohio State, those kind of clubs, and now Iowa. Steve, the thing I'll two-part question, because I'm just interested in your answers, would be, number one, is Maryland, how much have they fortified themselves along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball to take on this kind of team? And number two, take on Fleet Davis. What makes him special? What kind of back is he for people that are going to see him for the first time?
Yes, so I've had the same concerns that you were you're voicing right there about the interior, and it's always been an issue for the last several years with Maryland, and most notably, it's offensive line. I think, well, that defense too. They've probably been equal. And it's just they've been focusing on trying to recruit it. The big problem is you get 2 5-star offensive tackles in this area, and you get 100 offers on that kid, and he's probably going to Oregon or Ohio State or somewhere, right? So it's hard to keep the 5-star tackles and guards in state because they're getting so much attention. So they're trying to still find those guys that they can bring in. Now, they've had a transfer, and Eric Harris, who came in, and now he's their starting center, I think, from a community college, Hutchinson, I believe. And he's really solidified the line, allowed some of the other guys to move different positions. And Spencer Anderson's our right tackle. He was just Pro Football Focus right tackle in the nation for the Kent State game. So they're playing well, and they've played well. They haven't ran the ball a lot in comparison to how many times they've thrown it, but they're averaging a good yards per carry when they do decide to run. I haven't seen, maybe Illinois was the first game where I saw an offensive line get beat one-on-one maybe once or twice and got Tagovailoa caught up in a sack or two. So I don't think they're getting out physical 1v1. Now, there could be times where they're creating mismatches and they get pressure on Tagovailoa. So I've been more than pleased so far with the offensive line. And then if we switch sides, the defensive line is probably better off than the offensive line. And they've been recruiting real well there. And I mentioned it early on. You're going to see 9, 10 guys rotate on that D line, and a lot of them are young guys. So the future looks bright for the D line, especially for Maryland moving forward. And hopefully the offensive line proves itself today, because tomorrow it'll be their biggest challenge, Friday night. Now, to move on to Fleet Davis. So we came back into the season, we were returning 86% of our offense. So I figured that was the Funk 14. Jake Funk was taking 14% of the offense with him. And I was apprehensive of what we had behind him. And Fleet Davis, I knew of Fleet Davis. I've watched him, but he never got a chance to be the guy. And he has won me over. I'm in love with him as a running back, and it's because of how hard he plays. And he plays hard. He's not a guy that's going to go 80. He's not a guy that's probably going to go 70. He probably needs everything to go right for him to go 60. But he's going to pick up blocks. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's got great hands. He runs hard. The first guy doesn't usually bring him down. So he's really a 5-tool back. He can do it all. Back in the day, we used to play NCAA. You would rate players, and they would have a letter grade for all your attributes. And he's kind of a guy that I probably wouldn't have. He'd be a B minus to a B plus, like all the way, and then effort would be an A plus. So he's not going to wow you anywhere, but he's not going to hurt you anywhere either. So he's done awesome in filling in for Jake Funk. If he had more touches, he'd probably have better numbers, but he catches the ball in the backfield. I think he's running for like 8 yards a carry when they give it to him. So he's been great. And that's what you're going to see. You just get a tough, gritty, hard, solid running back, like what an old school running back looked like, although he's much more effective out of the backfield than old school guys.
Fleet Davis, I just want to add this. Fleet Davis, I refer back to the Big Ten Network. They did a social media post today. They put one out about top 5 running backs. I think it was Joshua Perry that actually gave his top 5. And I was a little put off that they didn't include Mo Ibrahim on the list, because I think he's the best running back in the conference right now, but he's hurt. But Tyler Goodson and Fleet Davis were both on that list. So that's kind of an underrated matchup everybody wants to talk about. Again, like Mark brought up, can Maryland deal with Iowa in the trenches? I think Maryland will load the box against Iowa. I think everybody's going to load the box against Iowa, but Iowa did prove last week they can throw out of a loaded box. Mm-hmm. I think that helps. Again, I don't know as far as Maryland's corners, how comfortable Michael Loxley is leaving them out on islands, but they're probably going to do that because again, they want to shut down the Iowa run.
They're a man coverage team. They're a man coverage team. They've been all year. You're going to see a lot of cover zero. Brian Stewart will probably call that 6-7 times maybe, depending on how things are going. But they are going to try to stop your run and see if you can beat them on the perimeter. And they're going to see, and that's what's going to happen. Kent State. So I asked Coach Loxley about Kent State because they came out throwing and they never stopped. And I thought that was a little bit odd. So I asked him about the game plan, and he said based off what they saw in film that Kent State did a lot of twisting and stunts on the front, which would mess up a lot of their run game, or from what they saw. So they figured, well, we got matchups outside. We're just going to throw them, and we'll set up the run late, and it worked out in that aspect. So they're going to, and on the flip side, they were cover one all day against Kent State, and they just put that safety in the box and see if you can beat us. And I think Kent State was thrown for it a little bit, and they had, when they saw press man coverage, they threw a lot of jump balls, and it was probably 50-50 for who won them each time. You got a pass interference, one got caught, two of them didn't get caught, and they did not back out of that strategy. So was that Kent State specific? I'm not so sure. I hope Brian Stewart's got a couple tricks up his sleeve defensively, because if you put on Kent State and you're scouting our defense, you really only had to watch one play, and you knew what we ran the same play I'm saying the same play. We ran man coverage the whole game. So I'm not sure if that's what we're going to do with Iowa, but I'm pretty sure you're going to see a lot of that, and it's going to be up to your receivers and your quarterback on the outside. Can you get us out of that man coverage and get us out of that cover 3 heavy man press, and then see what you can do. But they're going to try, just like you said, everybody's going to do that against Iowa. They're going to see if they can make Spencer beat you in the air and shut down Goodson. And I'm sure that's what we're going to try.
And Mark, I know you've got another show here in a couple minutes. Can we make, so I don't know about Steve, but can I give my predictions as far as how this game's going to play out?
Absolutely.
So I've got Iowa 28-24. Remember, Steve, I'm a homer. I'm okay. Yeah. I'm not going to debate that. I think you're a homer, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You're a huge homer, but that's okay. So, but I predicted Iowa State would beat Iowa. I predicted Maryland would beat Iowa preseason. I did change that. So I've got Iowa winning 28-24. I think, again, it comes down to discipline. I think Iowa will run the ball better. I don't want to dismiss the notion that Kirk and Brian and George Barnett and everybody that's working on this line will not improve week to week. And I think Iowa fans are frustrated right now with the offensive line, and I get it, because they ran the ball. They were top 5 in the conference last year in yards per carry, and I don't know what they're at right now overall, but it's not great, at least against the Power 5 opponents they've played so far. I think they'll run the ball better. I do foresee Maryland playing a lot of, like you said, cover 1, maybe cover 0 at times. But I think Iowa will be able to throw out of that. What worries me is when Spencer Petras gets on, third down and long, because Maryland leads the conference in sacks. I mean, they're gonna go after you, especially on 3rd and long. Mm-hmm. So if Iowa can stay ahead of the chains, even if if you can't run the ball, it's hard to do that. But of course, there's other ways to generate yards. I do think one big key defensively, and I could see this turning into some turnover issues. And again, Iowa, this is what they win on, is turnovers and mistakes by the other team. And this is how you get Tagovailoa to make turnovers. He's a short guy. Iowa is exceptional, at least on the defensive line, getting their hands up and deflecting balls. And that was kind of an underrated tidbit that I think, I'm not saying that's the difference of the game on Friday night. But again, his size, is he 5'10", Steve?
Sure.
Maybe, so he's maybe 5'10".
Yeah.
And Iowa just, again, has a knack of getting to the football and getting their hands up and deflecting passes. And that ends up being fumbles and interceptions. We've seen that so far. So I predict that he will throw at least one pick in this game. And in the game against Iowa, it's probably going to be a close game. That could be the difference in the game. So I got Iowa 28, Maryland 24.
I'll go 28-24 Maryland. I'll just flip it on you.
It's a close game. I mean,
yeah. No, it is. When I was watching it, and especially when I watched Kent State, Iowa, I came out of that saying, I think Kent State's better than we think, and I think Iowa may not be as good as we thought early on. So I took that. We got to take Kent State serious, and we got a shot against Iowa. And so after last week and then watching you guys struggle a little bit on Colorado State, I was thinking, this spread might not be as far off as it would if we start the season. And then when I saw it come out -4, then I was thinking, then I got even more confident, thinking Vegas is on my side here, because how many people in the country are going to see number 5 Iowa versus an unranked team and only getting 4 points? They're going to get a ton of money there. So I think Vegas wants to clean up on this line. That's kind of where I'm at.
You could be right on that. And I will say this for Iowa fans who are scared about this game, I do think Colorado State's a lot better than I know that they lost to South Dakota State week 1. They look like a different team on tape, though, against Toledo and against Iowa. Again, I don't know that you can run that kind of math with college football games. But
Right.
no, it should be a great game, Mark. And do you have any predictions for the game, Mark?
My predictions are on Patreon. I've got to honor my Patreon people over there. So I'll have a prediction over there.
Perfect.
No doubt about
Perfect
that.
plug.
Steve, it's been great having you. Everyone,
Yeah,
Steve
man.
Suter, Maryland Radio Network color analyst for the ball games and All-American there with the Terps in 2002. And Steve, it's been a great conversation. Appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
And Corey, we will catch you after the game, of course.
Yep, over at the Iowa channel. I believe we're on the main channel Friday night as well,
Absolutely.
Mark, and on the Big Ten channel. So post game with Coach Don Patterson. Steve, again, for Mark and I both, we really appreciate the time, and tell your family thanks as well for you're a busy guy. So thank you.
We'll do it. We'll do it again next year when you guys are trying to get that win back.
Let's do it.
All right. See you.
Thanks, Steve. We'll see you.
Man. Thanks, guys.
All right. Corey, great to have you as well, of course. And one more time, we want to remind everyone, be here, whether you're watching on the Iowa channel, Big Ten, or on the main channel right after the Iowa-Maryland game. Huge game, couple of 4-0 teams in the Big Ten. Check out Corey's work on the post game along with Coach Don Patterson. Corey, enjoy the game.
Anything we will do that.
You need to add?
Nope. I think it's going to be a great game, and I know Don will be en route. He's doing some TV work for Northern Iowa, the Panthers, Saturday, so he'll actually be in a hotel room in Omaha. But the good news is that means he can jump on with us right away. There's no delay. We've had to kind of wait half an hour to 40 minutes on home games, but no delay. We'll be on minutes after the conclusion of the game, so we look forward to it.
Awesome. Everybody who's sticking around for the call-in show prior to the Miami-Virginia game, just keep it right here. I'm going to shut down this link. I'll be back up with our Miami-Virginia pregame show, call-in show live right here. So just keep it locked in here on the main channel, and we'll be on the Miami channel as well. All right, Corey. Thank you so much. I'll see everybody in just like 5 seconds.